And this morning, we're going to talk about politics and about the church's the importance of politics being able to be discussed in church. Now, the point is, someone might say that let's separate politics and religion, and politics has no place in church. Well, then the church has no place in the world either, because politics is how we structure ourselves. But now, some people may be thinking when you talk about politics that you're talking about partisan politics. Why you should vote Democratic, why you should vote Republican, why you should vote for Trump, why you should vote against Trump. That's only a small aspect and almost the unhealthiest notion of politics. The politics is how we structure our lives. It's as simple as that. And so you're always talking about politics. You know, the most nonpartisan sermon is also about politics. You can't not talk about politics, even if you think you aren't. We'll get into that a bit. I mean, but the point is that's where we're challenged this morning. And the leadership 3 or 4 months ago, I mean, hey, we live in pretty interesting times, pretty troubling times with a lot of diversity of viewpoints. And so leadership thought, well, we ought to be able to talk about with one another. Our church represents quite a diversity of viewpoints, and I'm actually glad that exists. That to me tells me we're doing something right, that we can respectfully talk about and our differences of opinion, our diversity of thought can be graciously shared and respected and learned from. So we thought we should have a class that, and we've done things like this before, but we should have a class that aspires to set it up so we know how to graciously love one another in our differences. And we played hot potato on who was going to teach it, and I lost. So that's what this morning is all about. You can see the title, Practicing Light and Love, concerning the state of our world and the state of our souls in conflictual and contentious times. We've done this before on Wednesday evening, back in the summer of 2024. We had a whole unit of thought. It was under a series of classes on how to love. And for a few weeks, we looked at, the title was Navigating Peak Election Season, which was about as straightforward as you could get. And I'm going to cite a couple of examples or a couple of things we did that time. I often ask, do you know Calvin and Hobbes? And I get blank stares way more often than I expected, which I think says something about my age or whatever. But Calvin is this little impish 6-year-old, and Hobbes is his imaginary but real tiger friend. And it's brilliantly written. Calvin is so irascible. So in this particular cartoon, they're on the floor looking at newspapers. And Calvin, the kid, says, "These are interesting times. We don't trust the government. We don't trust the legal system. We don't trust the media. And we don't trust each other. We've undermined all authority and with it the basis for replacing it." And Hobbes, the tiger, says, "Interesting is a mild way of putting it. Calvin, it's like a 6-year-old's dreams come true." And that's kind of where we are in a lot of ways. A lot of it is, it used to be you were looking at free networks. and a local paper and maybe a national paper. And almost everybody you knew had looked at the same three networks and read the same paper. Well, now with social media, everyone can find their own unique bandwidth, right? And then we can't talk to one another because all I'm doing, if that's what I'm doing, which is not what I'm doing, I can list the 10 news sources I look at every morning, and they range from Newsmax to the New York Times to, it's quite a range. The Atlantic, I really like the Atlantic for the record. But so the other thing we did that class in the summer was the special case of social media. And there were like 6 points. I took it from a Facebook meme. And this is what it said, what we tried to encourage one another on in the summer of 2024. Post wisely over the next few months. Contribute to discourse, not division. Check your facts. Check your facts. I mean, I'm on social media, and often I'm reading, I even agree with that. I agree with the intent of that. I doubt it's true. And we all need to have that self-corrective capacity to work well with what we're living with right now. Resist memes and cheap digs. There's so many cheap digs out there. Don't do it. Create beautiful content. You can make your point beautifully. If you think about it, if you love enough, if you trust enough. And then it says we can transcend the bitterness and be better even when we disagree. And those remain with me sort of principles. I'm going to watch my clock here, not spend the whole time talking to you about how you should talk to one another. But I do want to talk, reflect on a few things. We've talked about politics is unavoidable. From the Christian perspective, there are 2 competing models. And one is the Hebrew prophets. And you look at Amos, and you look at Micah, and you look at Isaiah, and you just want to prophetically proclaim the truth and whatever the results may be. And the other is the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. And both of those models are great. You just have to have the common sense. Which model should I work from now? And the chances are you shouldn't work from just one of them. But if you are going to work with just one, Jesus is the default. That's for me, that's what I've come to. There are times when, yes, you roar like a lion, like Amos, but there are times when, like Jesus, you fraternize with the officers in the army of occupation. You notice how centurions always come out fine in the Gospels? They're not just nice people like the local cop. They're the commanders in the local army of occupation. And the Gospels are telling you over and over that these can be good men. And so you have to catch that. I have some reflections on my own experiences over the years and not wanting to see them replicated very often. Over the years, I've seen very good friends of mine just leave here. They say it's because of politics. They say it's because of somebody else's politics. But in actual fact, it's because of their own politics. They're not hearing enough of what they wanted to hear. Politics was that important to them that when they weren't hearing what they wanted to hear, or every so often when they heard something they didn't want to hear, well, that's it. Well, at that point, politics has become more important than God. And that's frustrated me over the years. Some really good friends. I have seen an elder in our church at one point in time, very pointed here, walk out on a rookie sermon from a Yale divinity student. None of us had met him. Got up, he preached a pretty good sermon. At one point in time, he mentioned the separation of families at the border. This was in 2017. And an elder in the church got up and walked out in the kid. No one had walked out of here in years. And I just thought, oh, turning point. We just violated a taboo here. And it didn't go well from there either. That was one of the darker moments. Very, very good friend of mine. Very good friend of mine. That does not happen here. Not well. No love, no respect, no trust at that point. But then I have other friends who we look around and wonder, where do I quite fit in this church? Because I read some of the social posts, and that's, I don't know, I'm more conservative than that. I'm a Reagan Republican. I'm a Rockefeller Republican. Where do I fit in? And fortunately, and that troubles me a lot too, that they come to that position, that somehow they sense they don't fit in, because they do fit in. And fortunately, they come and talk to Cynthia, they come and talk to me or someone, and you know what I point them to and say, listen, you need to get out more. you need to talk to more people in this church, because actually so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so agree with you. Did you know that? I mean, every group has a constituency here, but every constituency has to be driven by love and respect and trust. And then the value of what you can learn from one another, if that is what you're doing. Among my best friends in the church, Ken McAdams. I see Ken every week in his memory care unit. And Ken and I agree politically on possibly nothing. But we both have great senses of humor, and we just razz one another. And we get the tone right. He gets the politics wrong. And I know what he thinks of mine. Wayne Adams. Most of you know Wayne Adams. Wonderful to talk to Wayne. You can't help talk to Wayne without learning something you didn't know before. I also can't talk to Wayne without, well, that was interesting, but I don't agree with you. That kind of, but I'm smarter, wiser, and there are some things I did not know that Wayne knows and he's right on. The person that I interact with most in politics in our church is Wendell Gunn. You don't see him all that often, but for numbers of years back in the aughts, almost that whole decade, almost every Wednesday, he and I were having lunch. And he'd been in trade policy in the Reagan administration with an office actually in the White House. And we would talk almost nothing but politics. And I learned so much from him about economics, about banking. I enjoyed him. He is a wonderful personality. But I also enjoyed him because I was connecting dots now. And I wasn't connecting them exactly the way he connected them, but I was learning how to connect my dots better, because I was learning the missing pieces. And the point was, Wendell to me became a model of how to reasonably talk across differences. And this is how he would do it. He said, so tell me, What is your vision for how things ought to be? What is your vision? We're going to ask that question on the next page. What is your vision? And the person would say, and he said, 98 times out of 100, I could honestly say, that is my vision too. Now, we don't think we agree about things, but what we're not agreeing about is policy. We are agreeing about the vision. Okay, well, the policy matters, right? Yeah, but it really helps if you recognize you're pulling in the same direction. And now we can get down to, does that policy work better or just that one? Okay, so here's maybe the takeaways as we move into some discussion. Where love and grace and truth reign, politics can be profitably, beneficially discussed. Where they don't reign, it can just get maybe destructive. You've got to be careful. And the one thing I would say, and I think church people miss this too, where does salvation come from? Salvation comes from God. It doesn't come from government. Good things can come from government, bad things can come from government, but salvation can't come from, now beneficial policy can't, I'll grant that. But we get in a discussion, and it would be pretty clear to me that really active church-going people they think, they agree with one another that it all comes down to the government. I don't agree with that. It all comes down to God. But of course, when we've read the headlines of the paper and the social media and more than that, if we've listened to the news, quit listening to the news. That'd be the first thing I'd tell you to do. Quit listening, because the tone is there to jazz you up and get you going. Read what they said. Let you decide the tone that you'll approach this with. Don't let them decide. So, but the point is, the point is, when you do that, I mean, it's very clear that a lot of people think it is all the government, because that's all the media can talk about. And 1 hour or 2 hours in church just mathematically washes up against 40 hours with your mind somewhere else. And that's a lot of the problem that comes here. Okay, keynote text. Let your conversation always be full of grace. In Colossians chapter 4, verse 6, seasoned with salt, preservative, adds taste. Let your conversation be seasoned with what will be of lasting value, what will add beauty and taste to the conversation, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, the golden rule. And then finally from James, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, for man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Keep those verses in mind. I'm going to skip the case study. It's interesting, but another time. The question of the morning then is, what concerns or frightens you? Or perhaps encourages or inspires you about the state of our nation and the state of the world today? That's the question of the morning. Here's how I think it's profitably discussed. And we've done this before in other topics, and I think it's worked well. First, reflect in silence. I'm taking some tips here from Quaker services and from 12-step groups. And the notion in the Quaker service is you just begin in silence, and you sit in silence until you're prompted by your inner voice, by the Spirit, by your inner light. And then when you are prompted, you speak. Now, from the 12-step groups, you learn avoid cross-talking. Aaron is going to say something in 7 minutes that I'm going to want to contest.
Praise God.
I don't get to, is the point. That's what cross-talking is. You know, not cross-talking means Aaron gets to say what Aaron wants to say. And then there's something you want to say, but it doesn't have to contest Aaron. It's what positively do you believe? You know, what is it you stand by? And Aaron doesn't get to contest you either. You know, it's how you learn together and how you reasonably can say, you know, I could have a good conversation with that person. We could go some places. So avoid cross-talking, stay positively what you believe, then listen in silence again and reflect what others are saying in reverence. So we have 20 minutes. Should have given you more, I'm sorry. So consider now the question of the morning with these sort of sub-questions. Silence is how we begin. But what moves you most toward prayer these days? What moves you most toward prayer these days? Be silent for long enough to say, I have a sense of this being timeless truth, maybe God's truth, but I feel prompted. What moves you most toward prayer these days? There's a premise in there that you're prayerful. So you may be thinking of the equivalent. I'm not, this isn't a lecturing prayer.
I just have a question. You're asking a different question than the original one. Is it okay
These
to
are,
respond
these are,
to the original
yeah,
one?
yes, these are sub-questions
Okay,
by which you process that, yeah.
okay, yeah. So, I've reflected on the overall question, and so for me, I think what most concerns or frightens me
Right.
is that, we're living in a world where people think certain things are okay, which are really problematic for me personally, like as a person of color, to have things like DEI seen as a bad thing and gotten rid of. To think that children can be separated from their families, to see, like people who are without food, and that there's so many things to be concerned about and frightened about, and those things also move me towards prayer. But I think what encourages and inspires me is, first of all, being grounded in Christ, and also seeing that there are people who are combating this. Like, there are a lot of people out marching, there are a lot of people who do feel, as I feel, that some of these things are just wrong. There's no way you can wrap it up and justify it. Those are my beliefs. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I feel about it.
Speak up.
Oh, I kind of thinking of the big question there. It's, and I confess I don't know a lot about politics, but what I see online, it's just, I mean, it's attacking and get rid of this person without any respect for them as another person. In a way, I was blessed that I had one of my best friends in high school. We fought all the time. We didn't agree on anything. And at the end of the day, we were still best friends.
Yeah.
So I kind of learned that. And even when you're very angry with somebody, you don't agree with them, you can still, I guess what concerns or frightens me is that they stop viewing other people as people who deserve respect, even when you don't agree with them, or even if you think they're evil. You still have to remember that that's a person too.
Scott.
May surprise
the term frightened may be the wrong term here, but what concerns me most is that I'll come to the end of my life and that my children will say that I had nothing to say about what was happening right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. But at the same time, your challenge is, can you be passionate, clear-eyed and clear-minded and clear in voice about injustice and about what is wrong, and still have people know that you love them, that you respect them, that you value them as a human being? That is, it's really hard to do, but we have to learn how to do it, because I do not want my children to say, he was silent. I don't want that.
One of the things that I most fear is that I can't know what's true. Because there's so much information out there that is so contradictory that unless you're constantly sorting these things and have some kind of insight into everything, that you can't know what's true. And you know, is that my greatest fear? I don't think so. And then what drives me to prayer is the people I know, you know, the people I know who struggle. You know, I mean, I pray for Haiti a lot, you know, but I think that's what's hard on me is I don't know that I can know what's absolutely going on. It's because I mean, there are things that are, you know, obviously happening that you can say, well, I don't agree with that. But it's hard to know.
It's hard to know.
Along with that, I think of, for me, it's like the technology is like evolving to the point where it makes, you know, figuring out what's true or not more challenging, obviously. AI, for example. I mean, AI is gonna, you know, it's gonna evolve. It's gonna affect so many aspects of our work life, how we entertain ourselves. So I'm concerned about like keeping up with that, especially as a teacher. I can't even keep up with all the, you know, plagiarism cases I have in my classes. It's just, it's impossible. So that kind of technology is disturbing. It seems like it's out of control, or can be that.
Are my 7 minutes up yet? I'm gonna dovetail off Sheldon. And this has been happening for the last probably 30 years. Our technology is advancing in light year steps, and our morality is advancing in baby steps. And that's the problem. Our morality is not keeping up with the advancements in technology, so that you can say whatever you can say whatever you want. You can even claim it's true, and because nobody can prove it's not, because it's very hard to prove a negative. Now this is truth. 5 years ago, it wasn't true. So in 5 years now down the road, somebody may find out, well, that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But the problem is no one is keeping track morally. You know, we live in the age of don't offend anyone. But the problem is that everyone is offended by everything. So how do you say anything?
Can I say something about something that inspires me? I talked about what frightens me. What inspires me is when I feel like me and someone else have made enough of an investment in each other's relationship that we can talk about anything, and our relationship will withstand the pressure of that conversation. And I think we get it backwards. We first want to say we should be able to have these conversations, but we don't say what really comes first, and that's where the body of Christ comes in, I think, is that we make an investment in our relationships with one another. And no matter what we say to one another, we always know that in the end, we are still bonded and connected together. And that's going to survive any conversation we have.
gonna say another thing that, something that inspires me is, that, that Bess Johnson and Grant Andrews have Christian clubs at their school, and people come. And that's inspiring to me.
Yeah. Say that again, I didn't hear you, can you repeat that?
Bess Johnson and Grant Andrews both
Okay.
have Christian clubs at their school.
Oh,
I mean,
there's, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and
I
that
mean, you know,
different
it's, you
school,
know, I
yeah.
forget what they call them, what kind of
Hey.
clubs are
Yeah.
they?
Affinity,
Affinity, yeah.
Affinity,
yeah,
okay,
Kate,
great.
Kate actually started the one at King.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
hey,
great.
that's what, I'm,
Okay.
I'm sorry. to say my name.
Okay, so you know-
And I know the difference, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's.
But, you know, yeah, and they have lots of kids coming.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know.
It's amazing,
Mhm.
you know, even, especially in these times.
Mm. That's awesome.
Yeah. Art,
One of the things I wanted to respond to is Matthew 7:12, because even as a teacher, this is often what we talk about, do unto others is you want to have them do to you, but I actually put a little bit of a different spin on it. And I say, treat people the way they want to be treated, because if I treat you the way I want to be treated, that may not be the way you want to be treated, right? So I think it's important, and it is about knowing people and relationship so
Yes.
that we can treat them the way they, and one, I'll just share one example. I teach picture book classes and we critique. And one of the things I say is you can choose whether you want a critique or a celebration, because some newer writers, particularly if they're sharing for the first time, they're really not open for critique. They just need to hear what's going well. And then other people are like, give me all the things I can do to make it better. They're in a place where they're ready to hear that. So if we treat people the way we want to be treated, like I want all the critique because I want to dive in and make it better, but you may not be ready for that. You may just want to hear the good things. And so I need to give you what works for you. So just a little.
Yeah. no, I put the same spin. It took me a while. Art,
I would say a thing that I fear is a breakdown of civilization. And I think that civilization was created by a need of people to be together. And I think, in a lot of respects, it improves survivability. And then I think when civilization got more expansive, then there were more differences within the civilization. And although it's an odd comment to make, I think religion tried to smooth that out and tried to make it so that everyone is equal and we love each other as we love ourselves and those kinds of mantras. And then I think perhaps civilization got too civilized, and then therefore it then became independent. And because it became independent, that notion of differences became more exaggerated, and therefore there could be a breakdown in civilization. So that's my fear.
okay, let's look at 2 and 3 together and see how that adds to the thoughts of the morning. What does humanity most need right now, and how might this best be accomplished? And what is your Christ-infused vision for our future together?
I think love, it may sound trite, but it really is, we need love. Love and acceptance, and also Christ infused vision. I mean, that's what Christ, like you talked about, Christ, salvation comes from God, and God is also just, wrapped in love and wants us to show love to him and to each other. And I think if we can do that, but it is about, you have to really know people, you have to know your neighbor to love your neighbor. A few weeks ago, I remember there were some, I remember even Laconia saying, I love people, but there are some people I don't particularly like. But you have to be able to show that love, and that is really transcends. And when you love people, you can really move beyond some of the, I think, some of the differences.
Art,
Yeah, humanity might need to see its worst moment. And then respond to that. And then, you know, in terms of if it's a Christ infused vision, I mean, isn't that what happened? I mean, we just celebrated the resurrection, but that came after the crucifixion. And so through the worst moment, something came of it that was good. And so I might suggest that humanity needs to get to that point.
Yeah.
Its worst moment.
good crosstalk, but scripture actually backs you up.
You know, I was gonna say this anyway, but it kind of goes with what Art just said. Self-sacrifice has had kind of a negative tone, you know, you're supposed to look out for yourself and put yourself first, to be a self-advocate and take care of yourself. And so this sense of being able to sacrifice something of yourself for the good of others is not very popular. And I think but that concept is Christ. That's the crucifixion. That is giving up of your status, giving up of your means, giving up of your importance for others. And I think to me, that's the Christ infused vision. It's for all of us to learn that sacrificing what we have and who we are for the good of others is that.
Okay, looking at the clock. What is the church called to in contentious times? We're not going to do justice to this one. But let's point some direction and grow from there.
I've been hearing Patrick Henry in the back of my head, and all three of these questions seem to have the same answer. When he said, you know, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And that's kind of what we need to do. I'm kind of keying off what Debbie was saying, is that nobody wants to give anything of themselves. They just want to get. And until we get to that point where we're willing to give more than we're getting, we're not going to make any advance.
Well, and the church should do well at that. That's what,
I was gonna say that kind of answers all three, you know, maybe all three of those questions.
Charles.
I would say growing awareness. And I say growing awareness because I don't think we ever fully get there. That our unity, our fellowship is centered in Christ and Christ alone. Not in resolving the contention. Because there's always going to be things that and I'm gonna go so far as to think that we can't really come to a perfect agreement on, because we come from such different places. But if the church writ large, right, moves in understanding that the unity and the fellowship that's rooted in our shared communion in the Spirit of Christ, then that then governs everything else.
And here's what I hope we're catching. If that doesn't happen in a church, who is set up for it? I mean, there are places, but now I have to say, I was raised in a church where the truth was the truth and we had it and others didn't. That is not what works. You know, but as we've come to learn of the grace and the God who is love, and not in some sentimental romanticized way, but in a deep, create flourishing life kind of way. When, you know, we are set up to do that better than anyone. And God in the heavens, I think, has to be looking down saying, so do it. You know, looking again at the clock, I just want to note the last thing here, which is in light of our keynote texts, and this actually goes to a point Valerie was making too. Well, Valerie's point still goes beyond this, and she's right. But how do you wish to be spoken to? Let's start with the golden rule and then up it once. But how do you wish to be spoken to? But more importantly, how do you wish to be spoken about? Because on social media, I see lots of things that basically say some certain group of people are stupid beyond belief. And you just go, don't you see how you're heard? I mean, you started probably from a truth somewhere, but then you leaped over that into, and the people who disagree with me are stupid beyond belief. Not in Christian circles. You know, can't do that in Christian circles. So you know, and so I'm hoping that that kind of shapes our discourse in troubling times. You just think through, how do I want to be spoken about? Here are things I believe. Someone can post something on Facebook or in personal conversation with me, can give me another set of principles, another set of values, and that's fine with me. But there's a step that goes beyond that. And if you have any brains at all, you'll agree with me. You know, and just saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that on social media. You can't do that in personal conversation. The other thing I would say, going back to some of the initial principles I said, it's really important to me that the pulpit not be politicized. The pulpit not be politicized. Now, you can speak the truth about most things Valerie said, probably all of them. And that's not politicizing the pulpit. But taking a clearly debatable, contentious idea and advocating it with strength and dominance from the pulpit. The problem with that is the pulpit is a one-way street. And so things can be said in class by the teacher or by anybody else. It's fair enough because people get to read, but the person in the pulpit has a captured audience. And when they say something that's inflammatory or contentious, all they do is arouse reaction to them. It doesn't serve the purposes of truth. So it's very important to me. Generally, we've been able to do that. It's certainly been my commitment. You can say in class what you want, but the power of the pulpit cannot be abused. And I think generally we have a fairly good track record, and not perfect. Not perfect. I'm no doubt I broke my own rule here at some point or other, but it matters to me because I think that's a serious issue. I want to say that I love every one of you. I've mentioned early on that a person or two have hurt me. I'm being very specific. And who you may be thinking about probably wasn't them. But it does hurt when people you've almost co-ministered with for a long time, just sort of the person I'm thinking, I'll tell you what it is, so you won't be wondering about anyone else, would come into the church over a 4-week period and take all of her stuff out of the church silently at night so we did not see her leaving. And this was a person very central to the ministries of the church at the time. I didn't realize what was happening till it was done. I said, but I got birthday cards and CDs and everything from you. You loved me. What? You know, that kind of thing hurts. And you know, people have to make tough decisions in life. You may know a person that made a tough decision in life. I can respect tough decisions, and they don't have to be what I wish they had done, but they're just, we are people. We've said that 100 times this morning. We matter to one another. That comes first. And so on. Okay, Art.